the thing that made me the most cross is that they took that money without my permission directly from my bank account. So Etsy have broken the law here. Hello everyone, welcome to Vlogmas day 11. So it's a little bit of a different one today. Just before we moved house, I quit Etsy, and I did promise that I would talk about the reasons why I quit Etsy, and that never happened because obviously we moved and we got involved in all of that. Time went on and I just didn't get around to making that video. So I thought I would slot it into our Vlogmas series. Now, for those of you who are finding this for the first time, I sell vintage homeware online, and part of that was selling on Etsy. And in the beginning, it was great, and I was selling probably more on Etsy than I was on eBay. And the bonus of Etsy was that people were happier to pay a little bit more, whereas eBay is a platform where people are looking for a bargain more than something that they feel is quality and they're willing to pay for that, etc. But in recent times, that's changed a lot. Etsy has changed. It's changed ownership. It's changed the way it runs as a business. And I know a lot of people have complained about it. A lot of people are selling items that they're importing from China rather than how it started, which was a place for people to sell homemade items or vintage items. So we won't go into all of that, but I know that a lot of people have been disgruntled. I started to notice that my sales were dropping. I was selling much less, and it was getting to a point where I was hardly selling anything at all on there. Now, just to caveat that, that wasn't like the main part of my business. I think eBay, as most people who are watching know, is the core of our business. So Etsy was really a sideline, and it wasn't something that I was putting all of my efforts into. So as the sales were dropping, it wasn't such a big worry for me because it wasn't the main part of my income. But having discussed it with Nick a lot, I kept thinking, well, is it worth my time? Is it worth my effort to cross-list all of my items onto Etsy? And I'm selling most of my items at this point on eBay. So there were conversations about that, and I thought about it a lot. But then Etsy themselves pushed me over the edge. I'd been quite lucky and I hadn't had many issues at all with customers. I'd had a couple of returns, which was absolutely fine, but I hadn't had any bad issues as such. And then I sold a teapot. I sold a Cath Kidston teapot to a lady. And when I measured it, the height didn't include the lid. However, all of the other measurements were correct. And if you know Cath Kidston and you know the size of their teapots, then you're going to have some idea of how big this teapot's going to be. Plus the fact that I described the capacity and I put how many litres it had in it in the title. Everything else was spot on. It was just the height that I hadn't mentioned, that I hadn't included the lid. Now I appreciate that's my bad. So when the lady complained, obviously, I apologised, but her complaint was that the teapot was too small. She'd expected it to be much larger. Now, I didn't really understand that because, as I say, I had described the capacity, so you're going to have an idea of how big this teapot is. by all of the other measurements and the capacity, even though the height was slightly shorter than it actually was. So as I say, her complaint was that it was smaller than she'd wanted. And I said, you know, I'm very sorry, please open a return, or please return the teapot to me. I will refund in full on return of the teapot. And then she kicked off. Now, I've been in this business long enough to know that when people start acting like that and they don't actually want to return the thing they're complaining about, it's probably not because they want something different. What they want is their money back. At some point down the line, she wasn't very pleasant, but at some point down the line, she mentioned about compensation. But I have a policy where I don't give partial refunds for this reason, because I know that a lot of people will use that in order to get an item cheaper. And I've had that a lot. And B, she had just put my back up at this point. So I was belligerently sticking to, no, please return. I mean, clearly she didn't want the teapot because it was too small. She had told me that at the beginning. I said to her, I don't understand why you would want to keep the teapot if it's too small. And then at this point, she starts to say, well, it's too much for her to return it. And then I got a sob story, how she's not able to leave the house, etc., etc. And I'm empathetic to that. I completely understand that there are people in that position. I said, oh, I completely understand that. And that's understandable. However, Royal Mail will collect from your house and lots of couriers will collect from your house now. So that shouldn't be an issue. Then she got angry. And then it was just radio silence for several days. And I thought, okay, maybe she's pushed it as far as she can go with it. I've not given in. I've not given her what she wanted. And maybe she's gone, okay, whatever. I'm not going to get any of my money back. I'm not going to get the teapot cheaper, which is what I really think this was all about. I'm not going to get the teapot cheaper than I wanted it. So I thought that she'd gone away. That wasn't the case. So there was this silence for a few days. And then all of a sudden, money left my bank account. And I looked at it. I saw the notification come through and I looked at my phone and I thought, hang on, what's this? Why is Etsy taking this money out of my account? So I went into my bank account and I realised they'd taken out a full refund and this lady had just been refunded in full. I'd had no chance to talk to Etsy about this issue. And the thing that made me the most cross is that they took that money without my permission directly from my bank account. Now I know, because I've worked in retail since my early 20s, that is against the law. So Etsy have broken the law here. That is seen as fraud. To take money from somebody's bank account without their permission or their knowledge is fraud. That's what it's categorised as. So I got onto Etsy customer service, and the response that I had from them was that they had complied with all of their policies and that they weren't going to review the situation any further. And they basically drew a line. They wouldn't communicate with me anymore. They stopped responding to me. Even though I had explained to them that I had done what I had to do as a seller, as a retailer, and I had offered the lady a full refund on return of the item. They still stood by what they said, and the lady was allowed to keep the teapot and she got a full refund and I got nothing. Now, as I said, the thing that annoyed me the most was the fact that they took that straight from my bank account. I didn't have any money in my Etsy balance at this point. And I know that my friend Lex, who is Bad Biscuit on YouTube, had a very similar situation, but they took the money from her wallet. Now that is just as bad. It's just as bad. And it shows that they have absolutely no protection for the seller whatsoever, and they don't care about the sellers on Etsy. But taking it from your bank account without your permission is wrong. So I thought, what can I do next? So I gave my bank a call and I explained the situation, and they told me to open a case. And they said that it could be a lengthy process. They were going to send me paperwork that I had to fill in, and then they would have to talk to Etsy and blah, blah, blah. And it, you know, they'd explained all that to me, and I thought, well, I'm going to do this because it's the right thing to do. So that's what I did. And within a week, it was no more than a week, the money went straight back into my bank account. So clearly they had been in touch with Etsy, and Etsy just gave me my money back, probably because they knew they were wrong and they had no argument on that. So as I say, this pushed me over the edge. I'd already been considering whether Etsy was worth my time anymore. I know many people do very well on Etsy, but for me, my sales were dwindling and my focus was more on eBay. So I was already considering that. And when this happened, I was like, they're not having my business anymore. If they are going to treat their sellers that way, there is no way on earth I'm going to give them my business. There's no way. So I got my refund from them via my bank, and then I just deleted my account, and that was that. And honestly, it's been 6 months now and I do not regret it. I don't regret it. I don't miss Etsy, and I'm very happy still with my decision. So there you go. That's what it is. That's the reason. Yeah, I think it's absolutely an atrocious way of going about things, quite frankly. All it does is sends a message out to people who are of that ilk that they can get free items on Etsy. All they have to do is say that they've received something that isn't described, or it's the wrong thing or whatever, and they will get a full refund. No quibble whatsoever, and keep the item. And I feel really sure that this woman has done that before, because she knew what she was doing. But if Etsy continue to treat their sellers that way, they're going to lose a lot of business. They really are. So they definitely need to look at that again and think about how they can better treat their sellers, because that's their income. If they don't have any sellers on their marketplace, then they don't have a business. Simple as that. So I would love to know, do you sell on Etsy? Have you had any experiences that are similar to this? Have you left Etsy for any reason? Or are you doing really well on Etsy and you absolutely love it and you've had no issues like this whatsoever? I would love to know. Please let me know in the comments. Okay, tomorrow we are off to Canterbury. We're going to see the Christmas market, maybe do a little bit of charity shopping, I don't know, but mostly I'm looking for Christmas presents. So yeah, a little bit of Christmas shopping in Canterbury. So of course we'll be taking you along with us. So I'll see you tomorrow for fun and Christmas frolics in Canterbury. Take care everyone. Bye.